Officially live. Hey everybody, my name is Wes.
And I'm Lori.
And today, Lori, we're talking about accounting.
Yay, accounting.
All the things. This is going to be, I think, the most packed live stream in terms of just content and questions and everything else in between.
So exciting, Wes.
You said that in a way where you're like, oh, a little hesitant. Well, before we dive into all the things, a couple of things I want to remind all of you on. First and foremost, our YouTube channel. If you like me and you like to learn how to do things by watching videos, because sometimes reading is hard, well, we've got a YouTube channel for you to help you out with that. All of our previous live streams and as well as a lot of step-by-step videos we put in our YouTube channel. But we also have another great resource for our people, Lori.
Our Facebook group.
Yes.
Our Facebook group users are amazing. They answer each other's questions, and it's absolutely a wonderful tool. And then, Wes, you also have built-in helps within the program under the orange help button. Once you go into the program, you're in there, you're like run into an issue, go to the help button. There you can create a support ticket to ask a question, schedule a phone call, and you have the use of our user guide, which has tons of information, including more of those YouTube videos.
Yes, and our user guide, because it's accounting, I first and foremost just want to reinforce, please go to our user guide because we have these great videos that you can watch in your own leisure that walk you step by step through everything you need to know about the accounting screen. The setting up accounting article, which there you are, Lori, which we'll be covering a lot of this today,
yes,
but
we will.
The quick version. But that's going to be a video for you all if you're just new to accounting, or if you want to learn how to use some of our other features like Bank Sync, which is probably one of the best features we come out with ever. You can learn more about that as well. So there you go. Okay, well, today we're going to keep things simple. We're going to be talking about kind of a crash course of accounting, just like how to get going and everything. And then we're going to talk about some of the features, but more specifically, we're going to be talking about like pro tips.
Yes.
Like things you want to do to really get the most of accounting, or just things you want to do so that way you don't do things wrong. So we've got a few of those. We had to limit to 7 because there's a lot of things you can do wrong when it comes to accounting, because that's just the nature of it.
Well, it's the nature of humans.
Yes.
Just to complicate it. Just make it as hard as humanly possible.
And speaking of making it hard as humanly possible, we're going to encourage you at the end. We're going to have tons of time for Q&A, and I want you to bring us your hardest accounting questions to try to stump Lori. And she just gave me the look like, say what now? You serious? You serious, Clark? Yes.
Oh.
And so we'll be answering all those questions at the end. But feel free, we've got a couple of people from our team that are hanging out in the chat. So if you have like random things you want to chime in on in the chat, please do. But just know we're going to have a dedicated Q&A at the very end. Okay, enough of the pleasantries, Lori. I've got a stopwatch here. We are going to first talk about setting up accounting. Are you ready?
Sure.
Let's go!
Okay.
All right, so setting up accounting, Lori, how do we get started?
Well, the very first thing you have to do, Wes, when you want to set up accounting is go in and look at your funds.
Okay.
ChurchTrac comes with a general fund, and don't delete this. Don't even try to change it. Just add to it. General fund is for everything you're going to use for your expenditures and your income in ChurchTrac. Then you would create a designated fund for like a building campaign or missions if you have a lot of external or internal missions that you support. This is a great one to have.
Okay.
Once you get your funds in place, okay, don't get carried away, just keep them in there.
So like what's your rule of thumb, like how many funds?
Typically, even a large church won't have more than 6 or 8 funds, but a smaller church should be able to get away with 3 or 4.
Okay. Now, first thing I see, Lori, is I see my fund balance 0. I got to change that. Why can't I change that?
It's not changed here.
Okay.
We put all this puzzle together, one puzzle piece at a time. So first you create your funds, then you're going to go to your categories.
Okay.
Notice how I skirted by that
Yes,
question.
you did, because it's a pro tip later.
It is a pro tip. And so now you're going to go in here and set up all of your categories. ChurchTrac already preloads some for you, the most common. General offerings, tithes and offerings, whatever you want to call it. It's the offering that comes into the plate or through online giving.
Okay.
If you note on the right-hand side, Wes, you've got all the properties, okay? Properties allow you to set the income or expense, the fund that you want to associate this category with. Okay. And if you want it to be a subcategory, for example, if you were creating utilities and then you had all of your utility companies underneath your subcategorized underneath your parent, then you could do that.
Okay.
The children or the subcategories take on the properties of the parent.
Okay.
So if you make general offerings an income category,
which it is,
and then you want to create a category for your electric bill.
So we'll just call it utilities.
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 It's so utilitarian.
Yeah. Oh, goodness.
This is an expense category. Don't put an expense under an income, because what's going to happen is your expense is going to become an income category. Okay? What you would do is create your utilities parent and then create your electric bill, your water bill, your internet bill, your cell phone bill, whatever you have as far as your utilities for your church.
So I just created the internet. So then what I can do is I'm already selected an internet. I can say it's a subcategory of, and I'll just search utilities because I like to work smart, not hard. So now it's under there.
Right.
Internet.
And note, the properties changed a bit because you don't have your expense entity and that kind of thing. The default fund is still your general fund. You're paying this out of the money that comes in to cover the expenses of the church.
But I can always change that if I wanted to.
If you wanted to.
Okay.
Okay.
And so I'll just add one more just for fun. So we have internet. Let's call this water, our water bill. And then I'll just select OK. And then again, subcategory, I'll just search utilities. Don't want to have to scroll through a list when I can just type out a couple letters.
Correct.
And there you go. So now I've got my utilities, internet, water, if you had trash collecting, sewage, snow removal. If you're up north and you're dealing with that right now, I just want to say.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
It's cold enough here.
Yeah, it's 30 here, and then we're in Florida. Okay, so we've got our subcategories of our main categories. Anything else I need to know about this, Lori?
Well, Wes, before you can actually go in and use these, you have to have an account. So you're going to go to accounts.
Okay.
You're going to set up and add a bank account.
All right.
Okay? Now, this is a real bank account, something that has an account number associated with it and gets a statement. This is not for your payroll liabilities or anything like that. This is a checking account, savings account, CD, whatever. In this case, it's our main checking.
Okay.
Okay, so you have the question here. Is this an account held at a bank or financial institution? Yes.
Okay, so select yes.
Okay. Next, do you have access to recent statements for this account? Go get them if you do. You have to have this to be able to get the most effective setup of your accounts. So yes.
Yes.
Okay. Name it.
All right, and we're going to call this our church checking.
It works for me.
We only have one checking account at our church. We'll call this church checking, and it is an asset.
Hold on. Let me explain this for a second, Wes, because this does become a point of confusion. An asset account means this is where we have a positive amount of money set aside that is ours. It's cash flow. A liability would be if I owed a debt.
So like a loan or a credit card, stuff like that.
Your checking account should not start with a negative balance, so it should be an asset.
If it started with a negative balance, then you're overdrawing, and that's not good.
Yeah, there might be more issues to deal with there. But so yes, we're going to call this an asset, and we're going to go next.
All right, so next.
This is where your statement comes in. The start date of this statement is found on your bank statement. It says the beginning date. Usually it's the beginning of the month. So we're going to say 1/1 for the sake of giggles.
And the beauty of this is we're in January, so there you go.
It's amazing. It's the easiest time to start this process. The balance is also going to be found on your bank statement. What was your starting balance for January 1st? Put your number in, Wes.
My number. All right, so I'll just put a fictitious number. Our church had, let's say, $18,956.13 in our account. There you go.
Now, a question that I get before you create this account is, what happens to transactions that are not on my statement? How do I handle those? We'll talk about that too. So we're going to roll with this for the moment.
Okay, and we're at 6 minutes. 2 minutes left, Lori.
Create. Okay, so now you have your church checking account. Now, notice your general fund auto-populated. That's because you put a transaction in your transaction register. When you put a transaction in the transaction register, it is going to add to or take away from your fund balance, whichever fund you've got going on in there. That's how you get money in. So let's go into your church checking, Wes.
And to do that, I'll just select it.
Okay. Now, of this $18,956.13, we know this is not all general offerings. There are designated contributions in here. Okay, so you want to edit by double clicking or click it and click the edit button, whichever you prefer.
Okay.
Again, you're going to go in here and you're going to modify this transaction. You're going to spread this money out by adding a line item.
Okay.
Click that button right there for me. And in this case, we're going to call this missions.
All right, so we'll do missions.
You didn't create a missions category.
I did not create a missions category.
Well, how do you fix that, Wes?
Well, I can go back and I can fix that. So then I can go to categories real quick. This is why it's so important to create the funds, then create all the categories, and then we can create our account. So I'll just call this missions real quick. It's so fast to create these things.
Link it to your missions fund for me.
Oh, yes. So
there you go. Now, go back to your checking account. Edit that beginning balance transaction.
And then I can select missions. There it is. Now I'm gonna have to do some math here in my head because let's just say for our intensive purposes, we're only splitting this amongst 2 different funds.
That's fine.
But typically churches are probably gonna have like 3, 4, 5 different funds they're gonna be splitting this beginning balance with.
Exactly.
So we'll just say, let me get my calculator out.
Just do $2,000 in there because we're getting ready to send this money off the beginning of the year. So that would deplete your first one by $2,000 and bring it to 16 instead of 18.
There you go. I like your thinking. So
Easy
there
math.
we go. So then we split it up. So now
note, the balance is exactly what we wanted it to be, $18,956.13. This doesn't change. This is still going to be the same transaction. It just has more details in it.
Okay.
So if you need to memo this transaction, if you need to put notes on these, as in these are carryovers from the year before, whatever, that's how you're going to indicate how you're starting, okay?
And I'm just saying beginning balance. I mean, every church is different. They're going to say different things. And that's it. So I hit close. So now it's saying multiple categories. So now when I go back home to my account screen, now my funds actually have the amounts that I want to be in them.
If a fund has $0 in it, it will not show on the right-hand side of that screen.
Cool.
So if you create a fund and you never go add money to that fund through a transaction, you're not going to have it show on the right-hand side of that screen.
Well, as fun as that was, we need to move on. So we've talked about setting up accounting, and that was obviously the very quick version. I encourage you to check out our videos where Lori actually goes into a little bit more detail than what we just did. But let's talk about just some of the accounting features. And we're not going to spend a ton of time on them just because there's so many, but we're going to highlight some of our accounting features. So now I've just flown over to another test account that we used to show this off. So let's go ahead. Let's start showing some accounting features, Lori.
Okay. Important feature. I know it sounds crazy, but people need to know how to add a transaction.
Yes.
We get all the time, how do I get transactions into ChurchTrac? We have to open the account you want to do the transaction in, which means you have to have created the account. So if you have not created it, let's go back to the process we just did and get all that in place first. Okay? Pro tip I'm going to give right now, Wes.
Okay.
Giving categories and accounting categories work at the same category list.
Yes, they do.
Okay, so if you create all of your income categories in giving, then you have created income categories in your categories table in accounting.
Yep.
So you can use them. You're going to want to make sure that you don't duplicate things in this process.
Yes, and that'd be lame if they didn't carry over. That'd be a lot of extra work.
It wouldn't work.
All right, so I'm on my account screen. I just click whatever account that I want to add in a transaction. And again, these are all just fictitious transactions here to show it off, but all I have to do is select Add Transaction. And there you go. I can start typing out whatever it is I want to pay. So
let's talk about transaction types here, Wes.
Okay.
Okay. So there are 3 transaction types. There's a deposit or a credit entry. That's going to come from your giving screen, or if you have an insurance refund, or somebody pays rent to the church. These are going to be deposits. Those don't go through the giving screen. Only contributions go through the giving screen, okay? An expense transaction is going to be a bill pay, an ACH, supplies, whatever you're doing that's going to take money out of the checking account. And then there's a third transaction called an account-to-account transfer. If you have more than one account in ChurchTrac, you can utilize this feature to move money from your checking to your savings, or money from your checking to a CD, or savings to a credit card, whatever. You're going to utilize that transaction, and it changes the look of the transaction. Don't deplete money from one account and put it into the other, because it's going to skew your records. Use the correct transaction type.
Yes, and we have videos, by the way, too, that walk you through this process, because it's a pretty common thing at churches to do this.
It is, and if it's done wrong, it really skews the budget and everything, because all of the transactions that go through your account's registers feed into your budget categories. So there's a lot that goes on in the background of ChurchTrac that keeps the complexity down, so that you guys can utilize it and not have to think about every little thing. Okay?
Right.
Now, categories. Use the details in your transactions, Wes. If this transaction is to pay for transportation and you dropped in a payee, let's talk about that for a second. There's an option there that says show payee address. There's a lot that goes on with payees. Again, this is a user guide feature that's going to be explained very well. But for things that you pay on a regular basis, Wes, what would you pay on a regular basis?
Oh, I mean, just going through my payees, like business internet at our church. And I love this.
Where's the coffee shop?
Oh, we need to add that. But this is so great, because you can type in a transaction. Let's say the first time you're paying someone.
Yeah.
I'll just use an example here. So I'm just going to say fake first time transaction. I know, I'm super clever. And then I can save this payee for quick entry next time, and then pull my category, my fund. And then that's going to create a memorized transaction,
right.
aka
it just drops it right in for you.
Yeah, and so from here, I can put like any notes I want to put on there. I can put a memo, all that stuff. I can even drag and drop. Let's say it's an invoice. So like, just to go back to, I'll use my...
Here, where's your water thing?
Yeah, I have my water bill that I can use, or community electric. So I've got all this. So they obviously provide me with an invoice every month, and so I can drag and drop that invoice, put that in there, have it digitally stored, which is great.
And it's accessible from your file storage. So there are so many functions that are within this window to make life easy for you. As soon as you save this transaction, it depletes your balance, it updates everything on the account screen for you, and you have the ability, Wes, to print checks from here if there's a check number in place on that transaction.
Yep.
You are of the age, I'm just going to throw that out there, that you do everything electronically. I honestly do too, for most part. But there are actually a few companies out there that still require you to write a check.
Yep.
In ChurchTrac, to print a check, you must enter a check number in the REF or reference field.
Yeah.
Okay? That's going to be the trigger that allows you to print a check. We have gotten so many check printing questions this year. So it is there. It's available to you. And if you need assistance, let us know through a support ticket, and we'll be glad to help. Now,
a feature I love that's a new feature is bank sync and import rules, because what we just did...
Do the opposite. It's import rules and then bank sync, because if you get the cart before the horse, you get run over.
That's very true. And so in ChurchTrac, we can create all these different rules, and we can have all these different transactions automatically come from our bank. So cool. And so right now I've got all these transactions, or I'm sorry, this is a different account. Let me go to another account here. So here's my credit card. So I have my credit card, zero balance right now, but I've got all these transactions that I can bring in if I want to, directly from my bank. I didn't have to do anything.
Well, you do have to push the sync button.
Yes, you do have to do the sync button and add those.
We've got a lot of questions about that they think it just auto feeds, but there is under the actions button, there is a sync new transactions option, which is going to prompt you with a date. You have to click this, and it's not going to just auto feed unless you actually do this. So when you see the date, that's today's date. We want to go backwards, Wes. Mm-hmm. Go back in time for me. How far you want to go back?
Well, I could, but I already have the things pulled up here, and I don't want to show real financial data, so we will avoid that.
That's awesome.
But what I want to do is just show just the beauty of this. So I've got all these transactions, right? Well, I'm going to be honest, some of them don't look the prettiest. And it would be nice if I could make them look better, or just have them automatically be assigned to different categories. Because right now they're all assigned to general offerings, and that's not going to be the case with so many.
No, because now you're depleting your income. Be detailed in your transactions.
So I can go to Manage Import Rules from our Actions button here. Now I have no rules right now. I cleared them all out just for you all so I can show this, but I can add a rule. And so this is why I always say first do your import, first do your sync so you can see all your transactions. That way you know what rules you want to start creating. I know you said do the other one first.
Opposite.
I always say, so we're in disagreement here, but I always say do this just because I'm visual. I need to see the transactions first so I know what rules I want to put in place. And so, because you can reapply them. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm looking at my transactions, just kind of flying through them, and I see this JEA Easy Pay. So for us, that is our utilities, our electric. And so in our case here, this is our electric bill. So I want to go ahead, I want to make a rule. And so I will go to my Manage Import Rules, add a rule. And now I'm just going to call this electric. And I'm going to apply this to transactions. It can be a specific account or just all accounts. And I'm going to say if the payee contains JEA, not JEP, JEA, then it automatically applies the actions below. Now you can skip some transactions, by the way, but this is not very common practice. So now I can change the payee description, and I'm going to call this electric bill. And then I can select the category that I want to assign this to. So I can assign this to my utilities category. And then
you have an electric category, don't you?
I believe I do. Yeah, there it is. And so now from here, I can select what fund I want this to come from. General fund. Add transaction tags, which I can, honestly for this, I can call it an auto pay because many of ours are auto pay here.
That's a good thing.
So I'm going to do that as a transaction tag.
Wait, one more thing.
Yeah.
You cannot add your statement from your rules or your sync window. You
Correct.
have to add the transaction. So apply the rules, add the transactions, then go back in and put your statements on there.
Yeah, and just to show, so let's say I was creating more rules and everything. So I go back to my import. Well, obviously that JEA is still there. And the reason why it's still there is because I haven't applied those rules. So what I can do is reapply the rules now. So everybody watch this, reapply rules. And now, whenever I go to that page, wherever that was, electric bill, and it went to the electric bill category.
I love it.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
And you can have multiple rules in here. So it's not like you only have to have one. You can have multiple things so that when you run those rules, it updates your transactions automatically.
Yeah, and you can have as many rules as you want. I'm not much of a rule follower. Sometimes I like to go rogue, but when it comes to my accounting, I like to have a lot of rules.
All the details. All the details.
All right, now Lori, kind of fast forwarding because we have so many other things we got to cover as far as some of the top features here. Let's briefly reports. Now we don't want to talk about all the different accounting ports, but I think it's worth stating here because we get asked all the time, where is the profit and loss report?
Where's the P&L?
Where is that report, Lori?
It's called your income statement, guys. The income statement is a snippet of information. It's based on a time frame. So when you start your dates, you put your start date in here. Remember, it's going to show data from the beginning of this date to the end of this date. Everything that goes on in between is going to show you, but nothing outside of that, okay? So keep that in mind, but it's your P&L. If you make it for a wide range or a short range, it's still only going to show you what's in that range, okay? Yeah. The balance sheet, Wes.
The balance sheet.
This report is actually it's a handy-dandy report.
Handy-dandy, okay.
So it's going to show all of your accounts and all of the funds, and it's going to show whether it's an income or an asset or a liability. It's going to show you this, and it's going to break down the funds that you have applied and give you your net position. This is from the beginning of time, in this case, the beginning of when you started using ChurchTrac,
okay,
through an end date. You can set that start date to any date you want. It's still going to be
from the end of time. Is that a song?
From the beginning of time.
Okay.
So when the dinosaurs were here, I don't know. But anyway, when you run this report, it's going to provide you that data. Banks like these two reports.
Yeah.
If somebody tells you that this is not an accurate report, I'm going to use garbage in, garbage out. If your data is not accurate and you're not providing the details, then you're not going to have good reports. The more data you put in, the better your reports look. And
this is a good example because this is a test account that we don't put that much data in, and so obviously the data is going to be terrible in our report. It's still informational though. Yeah. I mean, based on what I can see, you really like the general fund. Yes, I do. So. And another thing worth pointing out too, a lot of the reports in ChurchTrac you can export to CSV. because we've kind of taken this approach where we've got these reports that you can quickly generate that are super easy, not only for you to read, but your volunteers and your treasurer team and stuff like that. But if you're the type of person like me, I'm this type of person where I like to make my reports a very specific way, a way that no software will do except Excel, because I can customize everything. Yeah. Well, if that's you and you're like me and you just like to customize everything because you're like that, well, you can just export it to a CSV, not a CVS, that's a pharmacy store,
yeah.
But a CSV, and then you can go and then change that port, add the colors you want, put in charts and things if you like to do that sort of stuff.
Remove the lines, make it pretty.
All those things. Okay, so reports. Now, another thing worth mentioning, Lori, because we are short on time and I want to talk about some pro tips and answer questions, is the ability to search transactions in ChurchTrac. Now, we just changed this slightly. It used to be on this side, on the left, and now it's on the right. And so from here, I can search any transaction. And so
you can search payees, you can search references, you can search accounts, you can search categories, funds, or multiple combinations of things. This tool is your research. Go back to edit for me.
Yeah.
This tool is how you find everything in your accounts in a very snap.
Well, and this is how a lot of times when we're helping people in support,
we do it.
This is how you're helping find it. So you have the same tools we have at support. Now, another thing worth noting here is that...
Let's scroll all the way down to the end of that. So go all the way down. We also have now provided a report title. So if you want to use the search to provide your children's ministry with the information about what they have and what they spent and this kind of thing, you can name it and provide them that data based on categories and funds and date ranges and everything else. So that's even more cool.
And this is nice just because whenever I want to generate a report of something specific for a certain company or a certain missionary, payee, whatever it may be, then I can just click View Report, and then I've got this report done. And then if I need to, I can export that to CSV, not CVS. I always have to remind myself it's not CVS because I twist them. It's hilarious. Anyways, that's so search. And then I think worth mentioning, Lori, even though we've got great videos, but ChurchTrac, we have a lot of churches that come to ChurchTrac and still use QuickBooks or another similar accounting software just because of certain needs they have, but they still use us for their budgeting because that's how good the budgets feature is in
awesome.
ChurchTrac. And just to show you how fast it is, so you'll obviously want to create your categories and everything in ChurchTrac, but then when I go to create a new budget, I can just name it, so I can call it Budget 2024. And then from here, I can just...
The start date is important.
Yes.
Because this can be your physical year or your fiscal year.
And then I can just start selecting all the categories or subcategories to go along with those I want to add. So let's pretend I go through, I add all my categories, I select Create Budget. Well, my budget's halfway done because now all I have to do is start putting the amount to that item. And so then I can say, all right, this item is this many dollars, this item is that many dollars. And it's not uncommon for me to see churches do their entire yearly budget for their church. I say yearly because the budgets are yearly, but it's not uncommon for us to see churches do this in like 30 minutes.
No, not at all.
It's crazy.
And what's even better, Wes, is when you set it all up, the common question that we at Support get is, how do I get my numbers in there? Well, that's the beauty. If you're using the accounting screen and the transactions and you're using them correctly, they auto feed the budget. So everything updates automatically. You don't have anything to worry about.
All right, now we've covered how to set up accounting. We've covered like all the general features very quickly. All right, pro tips. Now we're gonna fly through these pro tips like super fast. So pro tip number 1, create deposits.
From the giving screen.
Yes.
Do you know why, Wes? Why do I always preach this? What am I screaming about on a regular basis? And I do. I yell.
I know why, but I want you to say why.
Okay. So open up one of your giving dates.
Okay.
Okay. Something that has data in it. Okay. So in this case, we have cash offerings of $3,980. But if Wes was to go in and add contributions, because we have a missions campaign going on right now and we need some missions money going in.
So let's say Ron was very generous and donated $2,000 to
That's
our...
$200.
Oh, yeah. See, there you go. You got to make sure you type things in right. And we'll say, I think I still have the missions. Yeah. So I can put here missions. We'll do foreign missions.
Even better.
And then we'll say check number, add the check. All right, so add this contribution. It's in there. Cool. So I've got this.
See the giving summary? Highlight that for me, Wes. Just kind of put a circle around it. There you go.
Right there.
That giving summary is very important because these details are what you need in your accounting screen transaction to translate over to the accounting screen.
Yep.
So once you are done entering all of your giving for the day, the date, whatever, you go to the Actions button, you click Create Deposit. This actually is a great tool to allow you, everybody says, how do I get money into different accounts? Well, if you have contributions that are going to your building program and you don't want to have to transfer them, you can go in and not select them, but then go back and add them to your business or building account. Then in this case, we would just create the deposit, okay?
Now when I go to the accounting screen and I go to that checking account that I did that deposit, it's going to be there. And there it is, offering multiple categories. But then when I go deep into there, I can see the details. And so this is so important. And
so important. You don't get this from importing from the bank.
No.
The bank doesn't care what categories you use. They care about the money. So you want your giving to come from the giving screen, not the bank.
Yeah. All right, pro tip number two, consolidate your funds. This is so common. We see churches, they'll create a foreign missions fund, then they'll have a local missions fund, then they'll have this other fund that's like missions and part of it. So they have like 5 missions funds. You don't need to do that. You can create one missions fund and then you can have those categories, because the job of categories is
to delineate the giving.
So that is a pro tip for you. Pro tip number 2, when possible, consolidate your funds. Pro tip number 3.
Please don't have a category for everything.
Yes.
Office supplies is a great example. I've gone into accounts and I see a category for stamps, and I see a category for copy paper, and I see a category for the copier maintenance, and I see a category for pens. No, office supplies are office supplies. Keep it simple. You have a memo field and a note field.
Yes.
Document it. If it's that important, attach the receipt with things highlighted so that you know what the office supplies were purchased. Easy peasy.
My rule of thumb is like a dollar amount. Like, obviously you may want like a pen category if your church, buys 100,000 pens a year and that's how big you are, then yeah, you probably need to categorize those things. But if these are just little purchases of like
that just
$50,
be under marketing?
Yeah, you still would do that. Like, very rarely does someone have a category that specific, even in the business world. So there you go.
Just saying.
4, transactions need details. What do you mean, Lori?
If you go and have a Walmart transaction, okay? Walmart, you can be picking up supplies for the kitchen. You can be picking up supplies for the janitorial supplies. You can be picking up pastoral snacks. Lord knows you could be feeding the coffee bar. These are transactions that you can break down. Don't just put that you went to Walmart and spent $350, because the church needs to know the details of what you spent, and the budget's not going to update because you spent miscellaneous. That's the category you're using at Walmart. Then that's going into the budget. It's not going to grab the notes or see the receipt.
Yeah.
Okay?
So we want to use our categories specifically. We want to put notes, any tags we want to use.
You're not using general offerings
No.
and this is our next pro tip. So this is good that Wes just did this.
Yeah, I did that on purpose for you.
Do not use general offerings for an expense transaction.
Please don't.
Because what happens is you deplete your general offerings, your income, by those expenditures. I had a customer actually reach out to me in December because his budget was flat. When I say flat, I mean he had one line item, because everything that came in was general offerings and everything that went out was general offerings. So he had a lot of activity in accounting for the whole year, but he had one budget item that had a balance in it, and that was it. And he was not happy.
I wouldn't be happy either.
But that's the way he did his budget, and his transaction. So you need those details to feed your budget.
All right, pro tip number 6, update your categories for your import before doing an import.
Show them what you're talking about, Wes.
So when we talk about doing an import, we're talking about going into accounting, and then we go to our particular checking account as an example
and
of that.
This is whether you're syncing or doing a bank statement import. This is no bearing whatsoever on the type of import. The category is always, no, right there.
Oh.
General offerings. Nope, go back to your accounts.
Sorry, I'm like way off here. All right, go ahead. I'll just go back to here. Okay.
Go to your import sync.
Okay.
The category that comes in with every single transaction is general offerings. double click that for me, Wes.
Sorry, you keep telling me to go somewhere, and then my eyes are losing it. All right.
Sync, import.
Okay.
Click on a transaction.
Okay.
And open it. Okay? You can update your category here. You can update the details here. You really want to do that. So remember, these transactions feed your budget. You need this correct to give you correct reporting.
And what's so cool about our software is when you do this, the software learns and it knows what typically goes where. And it's pretty good at guessing.
JEA/electric bill is a rule, but it will also then start just updating on the import.
Yes.
So teach it what you want it to learn. It's easier than teaching children.
All right, last pro tip. Account-to-account transfers are a transaction type.
Yes. Okay, so
we already mentioned this earlier, but
this is Lori's pet peeve. I'm not going to lie to you. So go to your checking account.
All right, go to my checking.
Okay, when you are moving money from your checking account to pay your credit card, you're going to create a new transaction. You're going to call it an account-to-account transfer. That changes the whole look of the transaction.
Yeah.
You're moving money from one account. Here, Wes, we're going to transfer to the credit card.
So then I would just call this credit card. Now, obviously, you're already going to have a
credit card payment.
And there you go.
Put your amount in here. What fund is the money coming from? Where does it currently live? That's your general fund because this is your checking account, okay? Memo can be multiple things. The question I get too about this, Wes, is what if I'm making payments from the youth fund and the missions? And that's fine. You can actually do a fund-to-fund transfer in another transaction. But this is moving money from this checking account to that credit card and paying it off or whatever.
So there you go.
Okay.
Now, we just covered a lot of pro tips. We covered how to set up things, basically a crash course. We covered all the core features. We did a lot.
We kind of made it sound like it's easy, but it does take a little bit of time if you're going to do this correctly.
It does, but thankfully we have a lot of great videos to help you out along the way and everything.
And a great support team. Don't you forget.
Yes. Now, we're going to move into a time of Q&A where you can ask us questions live. Yes, we're happening right now. Now, if you see that someone has already asked the question that you're wanting to ask, or if it's a really good question, be sure to upvote that question. Now, while you're typing out your questions, for those of you who are watching the replay of this live stream, hello to you in the future. Obviously, you can't participate in this Q&A that we're about to have that we won't even post later. But if you do have questions, like Lori mentioned earlier, just reach out to our support team. We're super fast. We're here to help. We're ministry leaders just like you. We're worship leaders. We're pastors. We are children's ministry leaders. You name it. We do that here at ChurchTrac. And so if you have any questions or anything, feel free to reach out, create a support ticket, schedule a phone call. You can send us smoke signals, however you want to communicate with us. Probably not smoke signals.
I probably haven't learned those yet.
All right, so going to our Q&A time. So go ahead, start queuing up all the questions, not in the chat, but in our Q&A.
We already have a good one.
And we already have some coming in. So as they're bringing in all those questions, I do want to reinforce our Facebook group. That's such a great resource for those of you who like to talk to other people like yourself who are in ministry using ChurchTrac. It's a great place to just bounce ideas off of other ministry leaders and also ask questions. And then obviously our YouTube channel, I mean, there's a video for everything.
I will say this about our Facebook users. I love our Facebook user group. I find it to be a very effective place to ask questions and get answers. But if you have a very specific methodology that you use, please ask support because we can give you the correct workarounds to do things that aren't necessarily part of how you would normally do accounting in ChurchTrac. I trust our user group, but at the same time, sometimes we need to correct them as well.
Yeah, occasionally I will see like a wrong answer on our user group, and I still let it fly just because I don't like to, you know, we're not going to police our user group really, but at the same time, like, yeah, just know that sometimes the questions could not be 100% factual. You always want to, like when it comes to stuff that really matters, you want to double check with our support team or our user guide, obviously. All right, question from Philip. Let's go ahead and answer Philip's question. Philip is asking, can you show a fund to fund transfer.
And make it fun.
Okay, we can do that.
Okay.
All right. How do I do it, Lori?
So the first thing you're going to do, Philip, is go to the account that you need to, that you're going to be working in, okay? It doesn't matter which one, just go to that one. So in our case, Wes, we're going to go to the checking account.
Okay.
Okay, in the checking account, you're going to add a transaction. This is an expense transaction because we're moving money out of one fund and into another.
Okay.
If you cut my hands off, Wes, I wouldn't be able to talk. The reference, I always put TRX in here because that means transfer, and it indicates to me visually what's going on here. Payee or description, describe what you're doing. I'm moving money from the general fund to the building fund. And some churches actually do this monthly because they actually take a percentage of their general offerings and they move it to their building program. So in this case, we're going to just say we did this. This would involve running a report. We're not going that far, but let's keep this simple. We're going to just move $500.
Okay.
Okay. Now, this is an expense transaction. So by virtue of the fact that it's an expense, it's already minusing the $500.
Yep.
Add your line item, Wes.
Okay.
Now, in this case, we're moving it not to general offerings. We're moving it into the building program. So this would be your building campaign.
Okay.
Okay, which automatically updates to your building fund if you have the category set up correctly with your funds. Okay. Now you're going to do a negative $500.
Okay.
This is adding $500 to your building fund. You say, Lori, you just paid it a negative. An expense is a negative, and a negative addition makes it a plus. Okay, so we're adding a positive. This is a $0 transaction because we're only moving money from one fund to another, one bucket to another. Okay.
And then, like, I'm going to put in a memo, or
monthly
I can
building
put in
tithe.
So monthly building tithe, whatever you want, or you can notate it here. It's really up to you. And then, is that it?
That's it. That's all there is to it. Save it. Bada bing, bada boom, and this updates in your accounts tab at the top.
And I just wanted to show you can double click it and
Yeah,
edit it
and see it again.
Needed. Yeah.
So go to accounts for me, Wes.
Yeah.
And then it moves the money from your general fund to your building fund. In our case, we've spent too much money in the building loan account, but
Yeah.
notice that the building loan doesn't match the building fund, and that's because we just moved that $500.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is as simple as it is. If you need to move money from one account to another, you do the fund, and you're moving funds. You do the fund to fund transaction first, and then you do the account to account transaction.
Alrighty, now we're gonna fly. That was one that requires a little bit of explanation, but I know we're gonna get a lot of questions, and we're gonna try to fly through them as quickly as possible. All right, so next question is from Jackie. Jackie is asking, how do you flag a vendor as needing a 1099 at the end of the year?
Jackie, there is no way to flag the vendor. You would create your payee, and then that way you have your payees in there, and then you can run a payee report either from the search tab, or you can actually do a payee report in the report screen. This would allow you then to go to reports, Wes.
Yeah.
Go to register and payee reports, and then the payee report. There you go. You would type the name. The value is the name of the individual that you would be creating. This would allow you to search the report and then have the data that you need for that 1099. I don't have a way to flag it unless you were to put an asterisk on the payee or whatever.
Or accounting tags.
Well, you still have to search for the accounting tags, but
Yeah.
at least in the payee drop-down, you could see the payees that need 1099s. I'm a visual person too, so I got to have all kinds of little tricks and tips there.
Judy is asking a good question. I already know what software Judy is used to. Do you need a chart of accounts?
Judy,
do you need to create a chart of accounts? My bad.
Your categories in ChurchTrac are your chart of accounts, because your accounts in ChurchTrac are true bank accounts or accounts that have a statement. In ChurchTrac, categories. So click on those categories for me, Wes.
Yep.
This is literally your list of what you would create as your chart of accounts. Please note, you cannot do double entry in ChurchTrac. So you need an income and expense category for certain things, especially designated contributions. So if you're doing a building program, you need an income category for your building campaign, and then you need an expense category for your building campaign. They can still both be linked to your building fund.
Now, I see a question here, and that was, I believe...
You don't...
So this question is a pretty common question we get, and so I wanted to refer to our user guide because we get it asked so much. And the question is this: how do you set up liability accounts for something like payroll liabilities? So, Lori?
You don't.
You don't.
This is not a double entry accounting platform. It's so much easier and more concise than what you would normally be doing. I've made a great video on this because we do get asked this question a lot. This whole user guide article gives you exactly the steps and everything line by line that you need to do to record your payroll and be able to track it with reports and the budget side of things.
You know, what would have been funny is if you would have worn that same jacket today that you had in this video.
I actually almost did.
I would have laughed so hard. But yeah, I just want to reinforce, like, so many of these questions we get asked, especially some of the ones that are a little bit more complex, we have most of those answers in our user guide with videos, because accounting can be hard sometimes, or it's just a lot to take on, so we've got a lot of stuff for you all there.
We also know that you're coming from different platforms and have used different options, so we want to help you simplify the process by giving you these tools. So don't set it up like you know how to use it, because you really probably don't.
Well, and here's what's funny, just kind of giving you all some insight into what we deal with every day. Typically the people that make their accounts in ChurchTrac, and when I say accounts, I don't mean like the accounts and the accounting screen, just like in general their accounts. People, typically the ones that are a train wreck are the ones from people who are pretty well versed in accounting that are used to a program like QuickBooks, because what they end up doing is they try to make ChurchTrac work exactly like the accounting program they used to use, and it's just not going to work like that. Your reports are going to be all messed up. A lot of times I see churches, they'll have like 47 categories and like 6 funds, and then they'll have like 28 accounts, and I'm like, oh, you overcomplicated it.
Keep it simple. It's just
keep it simple.
It's a KISS moment.
All right. This is from Jay. Jay is asking, for contributions, do you have an income category for everything that somebody can designate money to? Example, give $10 to youth. Do you have a youth income and expense category?
Yes, you do. The reason you do is because when they designate that money, so general offerings or tithes and offerings is money that the church gets to use for their own expenditures and keep things running. But if somebody gives $10 to the youth, they intend that $10 to be used by a youth program.
Yeah.
So that money is designated and set aside. That's why your funds are important. That's why your youth income would not be general fund. It would be a youth fund option that you would set up so that money is set aside in a separate bucket. Notice the funds that Wes has set up on his account screen. He has a general fund, a children's ministry, a youth fund, a missions, and a building. These are the 5 most common funds that we see.
Yeah. Because
these are the way monies are given and or spent out of ChurchTrac.
Yeah, and we try to make this look as much as we can to your typical church.
Right, exactly.
Now, question here from Michelle. This is a really good question. Michelle's asking, how can I activate the sync tool? I currently do not see it under my actions options. So the sync tool, let me hide your question here, but on the accounting screen, if you do not see this button here to link accounts, it means that you may be on an older version of ChurchTrac and you don't
account at the Plus plan.
And so, or you're not on the Plus plan, and so you'll want to upgrade your account to be able to do that. And you can reach out to our team if you need any help with that.
We'll be glad to help you with that.
This is something like daily. We're seeing multiple churches upgrade their accounts to take advantage of bank sync and also import rules, because both of those features are not available on our older plans, the ones from way back in the day. So yeah, great stuff. All right. Joan, is there a sample chart of accounts that we can use to begin the process? And again, Joan, not chart of accounts, categories. But I would reference our Facebook group for this one. Go ahead, join our Facebook group, just because I've already seen a lot of really awesome people in our group that have actually taken the time to post theirs. So if you can search the group for that, or just ask the question and someone will be sure to give you that.
And just to iterate, Joan, when you're looking at your chart of accounts, most churches already have a budget in place. So if you have a budget, that's where you start with your chart of accounts, and then you build off of that as far as for your designated contributions and that kind of thing.
All right. Is there a way to accrue a deposit, in parentheses, that we know is coming? Example, credit card donation that then gets deposited in the next month. Lori's thinking.
So Jenny, when somebody designates that sort of contribution, that is indicated in the giving screen, and it would need a memo.
Yeah.
Then that money is designated to a category. So in most cases, you don't have a credit card designation for but it would be whether it's a youth expenditure or children's ministry or something like that. You assign that money to that with the note on it to be used to pay the credit card bill. That's the only way you can do that. The double entry process allows a little bit more than that. In ChurchTrac, you just kind of have to track it with reports. That's the best way to do that.
Tina was asking about the P&L report. We don't have those, Tina, because this is a fund accounting program. It's an income statement. There is no profit and loss report. What are some good uses of the reference field?
We do get this question a lot, Wes,
Yeah.
in support. So a good use would be your ACH or your electronic payments. You can use PMT or you can ACH. If you have electronic checks, the bank will provide a check number that you can put in there, but it's not necessary. That can be part of the memo where you can just put ACH on there. You can utilize CC for credit card payments. You can use TRX for transfers. You can use DEP for deposits. That field is also a field that you can type information into. I'm not sure exactly what else you would use, but I mean, it is a reference field so that you have the ability to sort by the reference column and even in their search. So there are whole lots of tools that you can use there, but
Yeah.
just kind of, there's no right or wrong there.
Now I want to take a brief pause because I heard ACH and everything in my brain went crazy.
Crackle, crackle.
So if you're not using ChurchTrac Online Giving, I'd highly encourage you to check it out and read more about it. We save churches hundreds of dollars, if not thousands of dollars a year in online giving fees with our integration with Stripe for online giving. ACH rates of 25 cents. So if you do the math, that's 25 cents of any amount, whether it's $100 or $1,000 that someone donates, compared to credit card transaction, even at 2.2% plus 30 cents for
That
nonprofit organizations is a great rate, but it's way more than ACH. It's only available to the US, but I just want to throw that out there. Not that I'm trying to upsell you because we don't make any money off it. It's more of just please,
It's convenience
please
for the
look at this
church.
to save your church money.
Yeah.
We like saving churches money. It's a kind of our thing. Ruth, how do I show a bounce check contribution and then it got cut off there?
So, Ruth, the first thing you have to do is when you still enter the contribution in the giving screen, okay? Then if something bounces, you actually can go in and edit that giving. As long as it wasn't an online giving, you can edit it.
That'd
Take
be
out
a
the
void scenario, right?
Yeah, well, not necessarily. You actually have to go in and edit out the contribution amount and then put a memo on there, or you do a negative. If it's online giving, you have to do a negative entry to wipe that out. Then the bounce check fee, and I don't know how you're handling this as far as if the person's covering or the church is covering it, but in the accounting screen, you would edit that deposit and add a negative line item for the bounce check amount.
Yeah.
And the obviously the check that didn't clear. So that way the accounting deposit is accurate, because really and truly, when you move it from giving to accounting, that all of that deposit goes into the bank.
Yep.
When the check bounces, that's when you're going to have a negative entry, an expense transaction, if you will, with that negative entry and the bounce check fee to remove that from your bank account, because the deposit is exactly the same as it was. So don't affect your deposit.
Give me an example of what tags are used for in transactions and where they are visible.
They are visible in the accounting screen, okay, on the transactions. They're also searchable in the search window, but your tags are here. Tags are really just something to help you sort and find, okay, because in the search window, this is the only place you can report on a tag. Why didn't that open?
Yeah.
When you edit your search, scroll down for me. The tags are there. So
a great use of this would be like missionaries, if you want to tag out all the different missionaries you're supporting.
Right.
I see a lot of churches do this for when they're wanting to keep track of,
Instead of having a category for every single missionary you
Yes.
support, you tag them, and that way you can run reports based on the tag.
Benevolence is a great one. See, a
gas,
lot of churches do that.
gas entries or food or whatever.
Benjamin, you said don't use general offerings to pay bills. I understand why, but could you review how we approach this again?
I'm not sure I understand, but I'll just give you the process.
Well, let's just create a support ticket, because that's kind of a unique
That's
one.
even better.
Create a support ticket, and we'll get you an answer in less than an hour, because we're crazy fast. We're faster than Jimmy John's. It's wild. Well, we're probably not that fast, but we're pretty fast. Lillian asks, when I sync transactions from the bank, it brings me the deposit transactions. How do you avoid duplicating the deposits that I included from the giving deposits?
Okay. So in your bank sync, which you happen to be in that window,
Yes.
go to Edit Search.
Okay.
Okay. No, that's a lie. I told you wrong.
Yeah, I was about
You're
to say.
in the search window.
I'm in the search window, so let's go to like just an account here, and I can go to the sync.
Right. So say that some of these were deposits. In the Actions window, you have the ability to skip transactions. So you can go in and check the transactions that you want to skip, and they won't import into your bank account. If it was deposited from giving, don't include the deposit from the bank, because they're not going to have the details for you. So skip those transactions and import the ones that you do want to bring in. That's the same process too for entries that you've actually made into the checking account, and then you sync it and it looks like it cleared. In most cases, those won't come in, but if they do, you want to be able to skip them. And again, there's a learning process with the program, so it'll help.
Yeah, and this is pro tip number 8 from Wes. Do an import rule that skips those. That'll save you time. All right, this is from Melinda. Can I fix a contribution after an account is reconciled?
Yes and no. So Melinda, if you make, anybody, not just Melinda, but anybody, if you make a change in the giving screen, it does not automatically update the accounting register. You have to go in and either delete the original deposit and redeposit it, or edit it. I suggest deleting, because we make too many mistakes as humans, and especially when it comes to numbers. So just delete it and redeposit it. If it has been reconciled, you cannot change it. You have to unreconcile back each month back to that date, then do whatever you need to do, and then re-reconcile.
Yeah. Joseph, does your categories only allow one level of subcategory? Yes, that is correct. Do you need to have an income and expense category for each category?
Not necessarily.
Not everyone.
You don't need an expense category for general offerings.
No.
You don't need an expense category for a love offering. Some things are pass-through categories. You do need an expense category if somebody's giving to missions, okay? And then the church is matching those missions, because designated contributions for missions and the church's contribution for missions are not going to be the same. There's different funds. So it gets to a level of complexity there, but in some cases you do. So if you have specific questions about that, reach out to our team and they can give you the best directions that help you with your situation.
No question. I just love that we can link bank accounts. So do we.
Thanks.
It's an awesome feature. Let's see here. Next question here from Teresa. On the detailed category transaction report, Lori, can you select multiple categories? For example, the youth income, the youth expenses, to show both on one report.
Teresa, I'm going to give you a step that's easier. If you actually have the youth fund set up and the youth income and expenses are associated with the youth fund, you can run that report to see how your bucket's doing. If you have budget money, general fund money that's coming out of the youth, that's when you would run the detailed category transaction report for the general fund.
Okay, nice. Charles is asking how to get the main category to some subcategories on income statement. How to get the main category to...
I think he wants things to roll up.
Okay.
If that's right, Charles, the idea would be that you just don't include the subcategories on the income statement. There is that option. That's more of a budget thing than it is an income statement thing, though, because your details are in your subcategories.
Yeah.
So the income statement needs to report the subcategories. The budget can roll up.
Good question from Spring Meadows. Spring Meadows, that sounds like a
Happy
really
place to be.
It
It'll
really
be nice
does.
and warm.
It does sound nice and warm. I'd be curious to know where Spring Meadows is. Does the import/sync must be done by a user each month? Does this not happen automatically, Lori?
It does not happen automatically. I'm a button pusher. You have to push the button to sync it. Your bank is going to determine some of that, how often you can sync and that kind of thing, but most banks, I say that because I don't have control of all the banks, but most banks do allow you to sync however often you want to, once a week, once a month,
Once a
however.
day is typical is what I see.
Yeah, that's a little overkill.
Yeah.
But, I mean, usually there's a dedicated day to doing your banking, your accounting stuff. Sync it that day, let it bring in. You do have to push the button and select the date.
And I know where you're coming from because, like, I'm a part of the generation where I just want it all to show up. Like, I use a budgeting app personally on my phone. It just automatically shows up. Like, I don't have to do the same process that I do in ChurchTrac to hit the button. But
business, personal.
Yeah, it's completely different. When you start getting in the business realm, there's too many other things at play, and this operates very similarly to actually QuickBooks and a lot of other programs. And Quicken. And the reason it operates like that is because it gives you fail-safes and things because
Security.
You don't want it to just automatically sync things when those are transactions that really need to be skipped. Or maybe those are transactions because in a church we have giving and we want to know all the different giving categories and stuff. So that's why it doesn't automatically do that.
Details.
It would actually cause a train wreck if it just did it automatically and you had no say on that. I really like this question from Irish. Do you need to have basic bookkeeping knowledge to use this feature? Lori, you always say if you can balance a checkbook, you can use ChurchTrac. I would say I can't really balance a checkbook because...
Well, you don't know what a checkbook is.
But I do. But I would say you really don't have to necessarily have basic bookkeeping knowledge. And it kind of goes back to what we said earlier. Some of the people that make their ChurchTrac account the most... hot mess is a word you'll use.
Yep.
Are typically the people that are like CPAs because they're trying to make it work like something else.
Overthink it. Don't overthink it, Irish. It's really and truly, it's about organization. And if you think of ChurchTrac accounting about organization, you're keeping track of monies, what comes in, what is spent, and you're just giving it the details it needs for your church to run correctly. So basic bookkeeping isn't required. Ideally, if you have run a checkbook, that would be great. Business math is helpful because it kind of gives you the ins and outs of this. But I mean, really, it's designed for the novice that has no prior treasury or background in accounting.
We're getting a lot of really great questions. I have no idea what you were just talking about, Lori, because I'm looking at these questions coming in. All right. Darren, do you have a way to do automatic percentage transfers? No. We do not. That's a really good idea, though. It's a really good idea because it's pretty common.
It gets into a new level of complexity.
It does, but Darren, do this.
And that would only work, Darren, if people actually did accounting correctly.
That is true. There are some other factors. But Darren, do this to help us. Submit a support ticket, and it's a feature request support ticket. And Lori sees most of those, and then we divvy them out to our development team as we get enough people asking for things. So Darren, if we have enough people asking for something like that, and it's something that's doable and realistic in our software that would be beneficial for a lot of ministries, you better believe we're going to put that on our list. Okay, Teresa, on a pass-through donation, should you categorize both the deposit and check payment to the income category? Then you don't need a corresponding expense account?
Okay, so Teresa, this is a really good question, and it has this can get into a level of complexity. The first thing I would say is, how does your church want to see the money? If they want to see it come in and then they want to see it go out, you need the income and expense category. If a pass-through category, and I'll give an example, Lottie Moon for Christmas, okay? Lottie Moon's foreign missions. The church runs a campaign and says, we wanted to get $5,000 to send to Lottie Moon. That money comes in by mid-January, it's all accumulated, you run your report, and church met the goal and we're sending $5,000 out. Ideally, Lottie Moon should come to zero and not have money sitting in it again until we start running a new campaign for that at the end of the year. So again, it depends on how your church wants to see it. If they want to see the money that came in and they want to see the money that went out, you need both. If they're okay with it zeroing out, again, what it's supposed to do, then it's not a problem.
A lot of good questions here. Julie is asking about how would you add an asset category such as vehicles or land?
Julie, you're going to create an account, and in the account setup process, it lets you do this. You're going to determine the value of that land, that vehicle, those hard assets, and then you have to manually, annually depreciate those items.
So when I'm setting up the account for something like this, because this is a lot of churches I know would want to do this, so do I hit enter yes or no for this?
No.
So it'd be no. Is this account used to track petty cash, a fixed asset like this? Yes. Do you know the balance or value of this asset? You will need to enter yes. And so then I can name it. So we can call this the church monster truck, because our church has a monster truck for this awesome monster truck ministry that we have. And now I can click next. It's an asset. What is the starting balance? And so the starting balance would be, what did we pay for this monster truck, or what its value is?
What its value is, not what you paid for it. Because you may have had that monster truck, Wes, for 10 years. So it's already depreciated by 10 years. So it's the value today, the day you create this. Okay. And then every year you have to manually, that's why I said annually, manually depreciate that based on the depreciation algorithm.
Well, let's
and
just
that's
say
not within ChurchTrac.
$75,000, which isn't terrible for a monster truck, but those maintenance costs are going to get you. I can tell you that. So create an account.
But you better be budgeting for that.
Yeah, well, and that's why we have our budgeting feature in ChurchTrac, so you can account for your monster truck maintenance.
There you go.
Right there. So there you go. That's how you do that, your church monster truck. Goodness gracious, we're getting off the rails here. Let's get back to reality before I start talking about other things besides monster trucks. Curtis. And the other question just bumped up there, but I have a double entry from the import. How do I remove the entry prior to syncing?
Well, go into your one of your accounts that has an import in it, Wes.
I don't know if I actually have one right now at the moment, Lori. I tell you what, Curtis, this is going to be more of a support ticket question.
Okay.
Reach out to us on support ticket, because that's harder to show live.
It is, because it's a unique situation.
Angela, am I able to delete categories to begin the new year without affecting previous year's reconciliations?
No, Angela.
You cannot.
You want to go into your categories for me, Wes.
Yeah, let me hide her question there and then go to categories.
You can make a category inactive. A really good example of this are your pledge categories from prior years. You want to make that category inactive. It kind of grays out and it won't be available for use because it's inactive. And then you want to just create a new category that you would use in its place, or you may have something already. But don't delete. If you delete a category, you're going to be prompted to reassign that category and all the transactions associated with it to a new category.
Yep.
And we can't undo that. So don't do that.
All right. Hey, it's Franklin, and Franklin is asking, where can I get a recording of this live stream later? So Franklin, we will post this live stream later on YouTube, so you'll be able to see that there. Friday is what my team just told me. Gosh, they're so quick. It's crazy. Susan, can we use TSF to apply categories to an already posted credit card or utilities payment?
I don't know what TSF is.
Yeah, because there's a few different things what TSF stands for. I'll tell you what, Susan, create a support ticket on that one. We'll look into that. Is it a good idea to create a fake account for cash a department want to save in the office miscellaneous?
You want a petty cash account.
Yeah.
That's what he's asking for. Yes, you can actually create a petty cash account. We have accommodated for that in the account creation.
We saw that in account creation. Yes. So yes, when you're creating it, you can create that.
That way, when you take the money out of your checking account and you put it in the petty cash account, it goes in as a deposit, and as you spend the money that you have in the office or whatever, you account for that in your expense transactions, and that way you know when you need to redeposit money into that petty cash account or take money out of the bank, if you will.
All right, now here's what we're going to do. We have 7 more questions left. We're going to burn through these really quick, and then we're going to be done.
Okay.
Because we've been going at it a while, and there's still over 200 of you hanging out in here joining.
That's awesome.
So this is awesome. So we're going to finish these questions and everything, and then go from there. All right, Tamika, should pledges be designated to a fund fund, or should I create a fund for it? For example, pledges to a building fund.
So in this case, okay, the building fund, absolutely. So you have a pledge campaign for 2024 that's going to be linked to a building fund. You do that in your categories window that Wes has up on the screen for me right now.
Yeah.
This is where you would do this. Then when you create your pledge campaign in the giving screen, you'll use your building campaign, okay? By virtue of the fact that they'll use the building campaign category, it will automatically have that money assigned to the fund. So when it's deposited, it just goes into that building fund. If you're using a pledge campaign that's just your general 2024 offerings, okay, you have to have a specific category for that for your pledge campaign.
Yep.
Like he's got 24 and 24 giving there. And then all of your contributions go to that. That's general fund. So if you're running a campaign for something very specific, you absolutely can create a fund for that. If you're running a campaign for paying the church's bills, keep it general.
All right, question from Kevin. I've actually never seen this question, Lori, just because I'm less familiar in the laws of Canada. But we are in Canada. As a church, we're eligible for a rebate of a portion of the GST tax that we pay. Is there a way to track that on each expense transaction?
Kevin, this gets a little complicated, but it is doable. It is something that you would have to manually calculate because we at ChurchTrac do not calculate that for you, but it is something that you could break out in a line item and call GST and then enter that amount so that you can track what you get to claim as and get back from the government at the end of the year.
Yeah, and if you want to go into more detail on that, Kevin, just create a support ticket and we can dive into that with you. Karen,
we do get that question often.
Yeah, I've seen it before, but in a different variant, so I definitely wanted to pull that one up. All right, Karen, how do we know an online donation was actually deposited into our checking account? In December, Stripe did not make any deposits to our bank account, even though the donation showed up in ChurchTrac Giving.
Okay, Wes, this opens a door that I get to jump through, and I kind of am excited about.
Okay.
So if your Stripe deposits stop going in, okay, into your bank, you have to access your Stripe account. But 99% of the time, the reason this happens is because you have not verified something that Stripe has asked for. When you set up a Stripe account, it needs to be an email address that is checked on a regular basis. Annually, Stripe is going to require you to confirm pieces of information about your Stripe account.
Yep.
If you don't go into Stripe and provide them the data that they're asking for, they will shut down your deposits. The beauty is they do tell you this in an email and give you time to get this done. But if you're not checking those emails, or the person who's responsible is not checking those emails, it doesn't get done and this happens.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, the only thing we can do is point you back to Stripe. You need to log into that account, and it's a banner at the top that tells you what you need to provide to them.
They really make it pretty obvious, to be blunt. A lot of times just church leaders will set it up and then they will turn it over to someone else and never look at it again, and they'll get emails from Stripe, but they'll just disregard them and stuff. And this is not like a Stripe thing, by the way. Like all companies that do this sort of stuff.
They just want to make sure you're still alive, you're still going, you're still valid.
Well, and they legally have to do this, from my understandings, don't they, Lori?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's like part of the law. And so if you're like, well, I'm tired of Stripe and how they did that, I'm going to go to another company. Well, that other company is going to do the same thing. So it's not like the grass is greener.
Nope.
All right.
But that's a good question, and I thank you for asking that.
Yeah, that's a really good question, just because we've seen quite a few churches get affected by that. And it really always came back down to the person set it up, then never looked at it again. And yeah. How do you associate a giving category to a fund?
So if you are in the giving screen and you're setting up categories, you're not going to get a fund option, because if you're not using the accounting platform, you don't need funds. But if you're using giving and you're using accounting, then you set your categories up in accounting.
Yep.
And then you can use them in the giving screen. So you have to make that fund association in the accounting screen.
Yep, so you'd select whatever it is and then assign that fund in the default fund.
Correct.
Okay, I keep thinking, this is from Jacqueline, I keep thinking that the funds and budget are almost the same to some extent. Are they?
No.
Nope.
Funds have nothing to do with your budget. Your budget is only going to show categories. So if you have 50 categories and 50 funds, because you have matched them all one-to-one, you're running ChurchTrac incorrectly. if you have a budget, the budget is going to be based off of your general fund or the big bucket that all of your money goes into, and it's spent from. Okay, so the categories, the pastors, the payroll, utilities, the snow removal, the running, the kids Wednesday night suppers, all of the income that comes in, missions, children's, all this. These are categories that the church puts into a budget and spends money on. Okay, don't include designated contributions in your budget. You can't budget that. Those contributions are specific to what that person wants them to go to, and you don't have the ability to spend them willy-nilly or cover church expenses. So as you're setting up your budget, keep in mind, general fund for everything, not designated.
Tammy, at the end, at year end, will all your expenses zero to equity account?
No.
Nope.
So here's what Tammy's asking, because I know that's a question. Your budget ends at a year, okay, whether it's fiscal or physical. Your checking account rolls over. You don't go to the bank every year and set up a new personal checking account. You do the same thing with ChurchTrac. You can close out contributions and lock them where they cannot be changed. But the bank account continues to roll, and the way that you lock those transactions is to reconcile.
All right. Cheryl, how to enter reimburse members spent for repairs to building, money spent for? How do I reimburse members?
You do it through the accounting register, and you just write them a check or what have you.
As any other expense.
But I think what Cheryl also might be asking is, what if they turn around and want to donate it? That's an in-kind contribution, and that's something different. So
and do not assign a dollar amount. Please don't.
Please don't.
Yep. All right. The default category is an expense or income category and not an asset. That's from Julie.
Correct.
Yep.
An asset would be a hard asset. When you're talking about money, the balance is the asset, but you have to have the the default category. So how does the money get in there? It's done through general offerings. Julie, all this is doing is establishing your beginning balance transaction, and so that's why that information is so important. You can go in and edit that beginning balance transaction and update all of the details there.
And then Kevin is finishing us off with the question of, can you do a budget on a fund-by-fund basis?
If you so desire, but you've got to have a lot of categories associated with that fund, because you're not going to have the ability to pick funds in a budget, only categories. So you can have a children's ministry budget or a youth budget or a regular church budget. But again, you can also incorporate that into one budget and have it all been run to the general fund.
I always lean towards that, but you can still leverage. I mean, that's the job of categories, really.
Right. It's categories, not funds.
It's not a fund budget. It's a budget based on your categories. So if you're doing one for your children's ministry and they have certain categories that are typically for that, then there you go. Okay. Well, that was a lot of questions. I'm tired. I'm ready to take a nap. I know you are too. I mean,
if only.
We had 43 questions we answered on top of the fact we just gave an entire crash course on how to use ChurchTrac accounting, and we gave some solid pro tips, I think, too.
Absolutely.
To help people avoid becoming, as what you said in the email that you sent out, a hot mess. It was funny. We were going to send out another email that was like how to make your church's books not look like Enron's. That would have been funny, but we hit so many. I mean, we had like so many people register for this. It was crazy.
There are so many accounting train wrecks out there, and that happens whether they're using QuickBooks, Quicken, ChurchTrac, or the next fly-by-night software, or even an Excel spreadsheet. We are human, so you actually need an accounting platform to help keep your checks and balances in place with what your bank has. So please take advantage of ChurchTrac accounting. And if you have questions, that's what our support team is here for. We're glad to look at it, tell you if it looks good or not. There were actually 3 support tickets that came in this morning that said, I just want somebody to look at it and tell me if I did it right. Which,
this is how we're going to finish this live stream, Lori. So unlike a lot of other companies out there that like don't want you to reach out to them and are like, oh, you look at our user guide, don't talk to us. We want you to talk to us. And obviously we do want you to watch their videos and stuff in the user guide, so that way your life's easier. But On our setting up accounting article, because a lot of you are setting up accounting, or maybe you're having to redo it because you did it wrong, I want you to look at step 5, I believe. Step 5, submit an accounting review ticket. Go ahead, once you set up everything for your church, reach out to us and just say, hey, I wanted you to take a look at my accounting, see if I set things up right. Our dedicated accounting team here will look at your account, and they'll go through it and make sure that nothing looks out of whack. Make sure like the categories are the right income categories, and these other categories are properly expense categories, that you don't have 47 funds and only 2 categories, things like that. So that way you're not having to come to us 6 months later and be like, oh, my reports, they're not looking right. So we want to catch things early. We want to help you. We're really big on support here. So please reach out to us, have us look at it for you. Lori, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to join us in this live stream. Now, I know you've got probably 30 tickets that were just created out there. We're all going to start answering. But you all stay tuned. We are doing a live stream next week on Church Connect. We'll send out an email tomorrow about it. But that's going to be a good one. So hang tight for that.
You guys have a great rest of your week. Bye.